These events happened to me about 4 years ago when spent a year working at one of the largest theme parks in the UK. This place is about half an hour from where I live, and while I won't name it directly, I'm sure a few of you can guess where it is. I worked there as a ride assistant, and worked on several different rides, including 3 of the big coasters and a couple of the dark rides. For those who don't know, a dark ride is basically a ride that is completely indoors. The most common example of this is your typical ghost train. Now, one particular ride is based partly inside the ruins of the family estate from which the park gets its name. The ride tells a pretty well-known local story about the family that used to own the estate and a supposed curse that they were afflicted with. The ride would start with an indoor queuing area, before moving guests into a cinema which told them the story, and then to a place known as the Octagon Room where there would be a small effect-based show. Then finally guests would unknowingly exit the ruins and board the actual ride, which was a haunted swing type affair. The actual ruins are well known for being potentially haunted, with programs such as Most Haunted featuring them, and after my time on that ride I can 100% agree. One night during October, which is when the park stays open till 9 p.m. to allow guests to ride in the dark, I was sat at the end of the queue line. A member of staff is always stationed here to ensure that there aren't too many people in each group, and B, to greet the guests. Now, usually after about 5 p.m. the ride became pretty deserted, as most people wanted to ride the roller coasters in the dark, not walk through some very dimly lit buildings, so my job was really easy. At the end of the queue line there was a small station with a television screen showing security camera feeds and a direct phone line to the ride operator's cabin. The cameras focused on the outdoor entrance, the entire queue line and the cinema area. There weren't any blind spots either on these feeds. Now this night I was doing my usual thing, checking Facebook, playing Angry Birds and keeping one eye on the monitor, when I spotted what I guessed was a young couple making their way up the winding queue, zigzagging their way towards me. I locked my phone and shoved it in my pocket, as sometimes the managers like to try to sneak up on us. As the couple got about 3/4 of the way to me, I turned around to give them a friendly wave and to assure them that the ride was still open and that they would have the place to themselves. They were gone. I stood staring for a moment in complete puzzlement. There was no way that they could have ran out of the room without either opening one of the loud heavy fire doors or jumping over about 20 sets of metal bars that made up the queue. As my brain processed this information, the hairs on the back of my neck rose and a sudden chill ran through my very core. Needless to say, I was very relieved when a coworker came about 10 minutes later so that I could go for my break. While that was an isolated incident, the next thing happened several times but never really fazed me. Throughout my life I have had a fair few paranormal encounters and have a certain sense for when something is around, and whether it is malign or not. In the building, the Octagon Room was the last section of the ruins that guests passed through, and believe it or not was a fairly large octagon-shaped chamber. Usually after the show finishes, a thick, heavy curtain is pulled back by a machine to reveal a secret tunnel that guests must follow. About 4 months into the season this machine broke, and the maintenance staff realized that the part they needed wouldn't be available until after the park closed in November, so rather than pinning back the curtain, the decision was made that one ride assistant would have the fun job of standing behind the curtain in the pitch black, and once each show had finished they would pull the curtain and allow the guests to pass through, making sure nobody was left behind. More often than not, this duty fell to me. I enjoyed my time sat in the dark. After a week or two I knew the exact timings of all the light and sound cues of the show, and also scared quite a few people who weren't expecting some guy to be stood behind this mysterious curtain. In fact, many people thought I was a wax statue, and I would play on this before moving slightly whenever they went in to take a closer look at me. However, every so often I would get an immense oppressive feeling wash over me. The room would feel much darker than it had a couple of seconds before, and I would always get the distinct impression that there was some sort of male presence just behind me. Although I never turned around once, because fuck that, I always stood my ground. I knew this presence did not want me or anybody else there in his area, and he made that quite clear to many other members of staff. There were several reports of female co-workers being pushed from behind while working in that area and even pinched. The frequency and nature of this presence soon meant that I was one of the only people who were willing to stand there and endure the intense feeling of hatred that would randomly appear and disappear, all the while hearing an endless loop of some old hag cackling and whispering curses. I loved it.
So I will start by saying I am a partial skeptic when it comes to ghosts. As in, I don't believe that ghosts exist in the sense that they are the manifestation of people long dead. More to the idea that I believe that there is more scientific ideas, like dimensional bleed through or warping in time and reality. As some people may know, Alton Towers is a theme park in the UK, situated in Stafford, England. It was once a country home to the Earl of Derby Charles Talbot. The house was built in 1801 and was occupied for many years, and now is a shell of its original self. Visitors can wander through the house and gardens. In 2001, myself and my dad were pass holders to Alton Towers, which meant unlimited entry. So one weekend, we decided just to spend the day exploring Alton Towers house and the gardens and other areas around the park and not actually go on any rides until later in the day. Now at this time in the UK there was an outbreak of foot and mouth in the UK, which meant the park was extremely quiet. Less than 1,000 people in the park most weekends. So it was especially quiet in the old house. We had decided to take different routes and meet up on the roof so we could explore everywhere in the house. He had taken the north entrance and I had taken the south, and we was due to both meet at the tower on the roof. Neither of these routes would connect use together. I remember walking through the dining hall and looking out over the park. As I turned around, I thought I saw the head, arm, back, and left leg of a figure walk left of a corner. I thought nothing of it, as I just assumed it was my mind playing tricks on me. But as I walked further into the house on 2 other occasions, I had spotted what looked to be a figure head to toe in black walk between doors. And I had to follow as they were in the direction of where I was heading to meet my dad on the roof. On another 2 occasions I had heard whistling, and by the time I had got to the roof, no more than 20 seconds later my dad had appeared via the opposite roof entrance. To this day, I still don't know exactly what I saw. Maybe my dad was being an arsehole and playing tricks on his 12-year-old son. Or possible paranormal activity. But that was my experience in the house of Alton Towers. Years later I came to find via Most Haunted, the TV show in the UK, that it is meant to be haunted. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I'd love to hear from others in the UK who may have had the same experiences in older houses. P.S. to the people from other countries. There's a cool tale which a ride is based on in the park called Hex. It's the story of a local oak tree which is chained to stop the members of the Earl of Derby's family from dying after a curse was put on their family. It is a real tree, you can find pictures of it, and is a great tale.
Hey, I hope you like the video. Like and subscribe and you could be haunted.